So why don't we explore some of Logic's instruments? First thing I'm going to do is extend it out. So currently we've only got about 30 seconds, which is a little bit short. So I'm just going to literally copy and paste all of this by selecting it all. I'm going to move it, hold Option. So I've got that green plus, and then I'm going to copy. It's asking me if I want to copy automation data. I didn't think I had any, so I'm going to not copy automation data. And cool, let's just play that. Okay, so you may realize that sounds a little bit rubbish now. It's because we haven't got this chord track following along. We've just got an F minor add 9 being held all of that time. So we need to sort that. You may also notice this has come up, so we haven't seen that yet before. So that's when you've got two audio files overlapping each other. This is called a crossfade, so it's going to fade out and then fade back up. So you get hopefully a clean fade between the two parts. So yeah, that's pretty nice. Where it says drag up here, X fade, by default it might be on overlap, it might be on no overlap, but we want crossfade. So if I move the region length here, I can change where that crossfade is going to be. So if I have that like here, then like here, that's the section that's crossfading. So that was nice, that was smooth. So let's leave with that. And the other problem we've got is those chords. So we need to fix that by going G. We can just select all of those. And then we copy, or we click and drag and hold Option or Alt. And then that should now fix that section. Quite often in verses you need some energy to pick up if they're a bit longer, so why don't we just get rid of the tambourine for now. I'm going to select it and hit delete, and now we've got that tambourine coming in that second section, so it's going to pick up a little bit of energy. So you might notice as well, this has been peaking for a little bit of time. You know, I said about things going over 0 is generally bad, so we don't really want that. So what we can do is add what's called a limiter, and this is a type of audio effect that will stop audio from exceeding a certain threshold. So if we don't want it to exceed 0, we put it on so it won't exceed 0. So click on the audio effects, and it lives under dynamics, and there's an adaptive limiter here, or there's the other limiter. The adaptive limiter is good, and by default it's going to give you 3 decibels of gain. We don't want to actually make it any louder at this stage. We just want to stop it from going over the out ceiling. So I'm going to drag that back a tiny bit so it's not going to exceed minus 0.1. So that means it's never going to reach 0. And everything else is okay. I'm just going to close that. And now if I play it, you'll notice that won't exceed minus 0.1. So yeah, that's the loudest it will get. It's not going to go into the red. It's not going to distort. So it's a good idea to have a limiter on your stereo output. And that usually comes at the end of the chain, so you can have other effects before it. So one of the strengths of Logic is all of the virtual instruments it has. So let's take a look at some of these other instruments that we haven't looked at yet. So I'm going to come back here and I'm going to create a new software instrument. So you can either access the sounds from the library. So you can either, if you know you want a bass, you can come in and just hit that contemporary soul. You don't know which particular bass plugin you're going to get, and you don't know what effects are going to be on there. Every time you choose a different one here, it's going to be fairly random. We still got bass again, and then you've got a load of different effects plugins. So it's all sticking with the bass at the moment, but okay, say I wanted a synth bass. If I go to synthesizers, bass, and there you go. Now we've got Alchemy, and there we go. We've got a retro synth. So there's different synth plugins and for different bass sounds. But if you already know the plugin you want to use, you can just go straight to the instrument. So let me get rid of that. And there's a quick way to get rid of that now. If you're in 11.1, you can hold Command and you get this eraser, and then you can just click on it. And I don't want that bus 2 there either, so I'm going to hold my Command and click on it. If you're not in 11.1, you're just on 11, then this search won't be here, and also you won't be able to undo the plugins like I just did. You'd have to click and go to no plugin. So, okay, let's look at some of the different software instruments. So come to Instrument, And it's listed here for you. These first ones are all your most recent ones. So there's usually 5 there. And then you've got drums. So we've actually looked at Drum Kit Designer already, and we have not looked at drum synth. So let's start with a drum synth. Let's just go mono for now. And this is where you can program different kicks and snares. So you've got kicks, snares, and percussion, and hats and cymbals. So this is synthesizer drums. This is different. They're not samples. They are made using a synthesizer. So they're going to have more of a digital feel. But you can choose different ones in here. There's a sub menu here, so you can choose different types of kicks. And then you can move all these controls around. So that's what drum synth is. And for each different one, there's different types of things. So. And if you play your MIDI keyboard, that's going to trigger them and they're going to play at different pitches. So that's the drum synth. So let's come back to drums, and then we've got Ultra Beat down here. So this is a very old drum plugin in Logic Pro. As you can see, the GUI is a little bit intimidating. It's a little bit weird. In this course, we're not going to go deep into that, but you can just choose the presets here. So drum kits, you can choose a grimy 909. So there's nothing actually wrong with the sounds in here. It's just the interface isn't amazing. Okay, so if we turn the sequencer on here, it's got a nice little drum machine in it, like a more of a classic kind of drum machine. And if you come over to full view, you can see that there's already stuff programmed in for you. So if you hit play here, so that's quite nice, but you can come down here to where all these little sequences are. So there's sequence. There's I think 20 or so preset sequences. So each time it's just going to change. And you can change the drum kit if you want by coming up there, turn the sequencer on. You can stop it there. If you want to go in to full view, you can. And if you want to add in any on or off kind of information, you can just add in different stuff. You can click and drag. You can make your own beats fairly quickly in this view. Hit play here. So that's quite cool. If you want to change the velocities, you do it down here. So say I click on that, this here then is your velocity. I'm not going to go into all of this because there just isn't the time in this course. But you can also change the volumes of things by dragging up and down here, or you can turn stuff off by hitting mute or solo. And you can make your own ones by using your keyboard. So if you do create a cool rhythm in here, if you do like this kind of preset rhythm that they use, what you can do is if you see this bit down here, it says drag to arrange window, this pattern, ... You drag that in, and then you've got that MIDI into your main arrangement page. So it looks like that. And just a word of warning, if you leave this sequencer playing and you also copy it into here, you're going to have them both playing. So be sure to turn off the sequencer in the Ultra Beat plugin. Okay. So that's all we're going to do on Ultra Beat, but check that out. It's a little bit old. The GUI is a little bit old. And when I say GUI, I mean the graphics. Okay, so that's the drums. Sampler, we're going to come to that in a different video. So we'll come back to the sampler. Studio instruments, already seen the bass. So let's go to the studio horns. Let's go stereo. So you can choose the instrument. Trumpet 1, or you can choose alto sax 2, tenor, baritone, and so on. Trumpet, trombone, or you can choose whole sections. So that's very nice, and you've got some additional controls you can play around with here. Humanize, vibrato, clicks, volume, attack and the release. So that's very nice for horns. I do suggest you add on a reverb to this because they do sound a bit dry to my ears. You've got the piano, which we've already had a little look at, but it's a nice studio piano, recently updated in Logic. And you can choose the different models. So you've got the Grand, Studio Grand, or you've got the Concert Grand, or the Vintage Upright, which is quite nice. I really like the Vintage Upright actually. I think that's got a lovely sound. And then you've got the studio ground with just one mic. And it also sounds really nice. And you can add things like pedal noise, key noise, how long it takes the samples to release, to let go, and the resonance. So that's quite cool. And the main volume there. There are a load of presets up here as well. So there's ones already chosen for you. You can have a vintage upright recording room. I think that sounds really, really nice. So that is the piano. Okay, and then we've got the studio strings. Let's go stereo. Once again, very dry sounding, so I suggest adding a reverb. So when you're loading stuff in this way, like I am, you're not going to get any of the audio effects that come with it. But for instance, if I'd chosen it from the library, say I go to studio strings and then I go studio violins, it's going to come with some effects on it. So there's a chance this, or it should sound better from here. Yeah, it does sound better. So that's quite nice, nice violas. Similar to the brass plugin, so you can click on violas, you can change it to violins 1 or 2, cellos or double bass. I've always been a sucker for cellos. The attack's a little strong, so I might want to bring that up. And maybe I want the release to be a bit slower as well. Maybe a bit too much. Playing chords on these doesn't always sound amazing. You obviously can get away with chords, but like that sounds all right. Just be careful, sometimes the chords can sound a little bit too blocky. But yeah, you've got the same, you've got single instruments and you've also got sections, so you can have a small section. A singer-songwriter. It's nice. It's nice, cello, violin. And then you've got the additional controls over here again. You can cut off, resonance, attack, release, volume. So that's pretty cool. You've got a load of presets up here, experimental sections, single instruments, fairly similar to what's here. You can change the articulation up here, so staccato. Or sustain, for instance. That's cool. There's a few different ones you can go for. Turn that up. So yeah, that's pretty cool. So that is the strings, and I'm going to clear everything on here. So what you can do is actually come up to this one, and this is kind of the overall setting of this particular channel strip. So what I can do is you can bypass everything, or you can copy the channel strip if you want. You can remove bypass plugins, or you can just remove, or you can just reset the channel strip. So I'm going to do that. That gets rid of everything, and I'm going to come back to here. We've done all the studio instruments, so we've done studio bass, horns, piano, and strings. Now let's take a look at some synthesizers. So I'm not going to go through all of these, there's just too many. So let's just go with the two main modern ones. So Alchemy and Retro Synth are the latest ones, but that doesn't mean that these should be overlooked. Sculpture's cool, ES2 is cool as well. You'll see that the graphics, once again, a little bit dated compared to, say, the Retro Synth, which is a bit more modern. It just looks a bit more up to date. Yeah, let's start with the Retro Synth. You've got 4 different modes. You've got this analog, very moogy kind of sounding analog synth sound. You've got pretty much exactly the same here. It's just got slightly different settings, the analog and the sync. Slightly different sound. Come over to table, and this is a wavetable synthesizer. So it uses all these different shapes. So if you come in here where it says default table, you can go Digi Insect, and you move these shapes around, and it's going to change the sound. And then there's all these different modulations. You can choose a mix between the 2 oscillators. You can change it from shape or formant, semitones, and then you've got kind of filters over here, filter section, so a low pass filter, resonance. That's kind of how ringy it is, the overall volume, additional sub bass sine wave. And you've got some effects in here. You can go flanger, chorus, or you can change the filters in here. The LFO, which can be used to trigger the filter. And then you've got filter envelope, and you've got the overall amp envelope. So the overall amp envelope, short and fast, or more slower attack. And this one is the FM synthesizer, looks like DX7. You can move these controls. Gets a bit scary, but you can control these different sliders. You've got filter section again here, volume sign, effects, so fairly similar to the other synths really. And then also the overall amplitude and the filter envelope and LFO or vibrato effects. So you can explore these more yourself. Best way to explore this synth really is to go through all the different presets. So there's loads. So you can start with leads. They're like your main sounds, your pads, which are more evolving sounds, basses, strings, some keyboard sounds, and then your brass sounds, and then sequence elements or warped. The best way to get familiar with the synth is to say just choose the first one and then start scrolling through. And then you can play around with the different shapes and see what happens. So that is the retro synth. So it sounds quite warm, quite full. It's a nice synthesizer. Next synthesizer we're going to look at is Alchemy. So this looks a little bit daunting, but it's a really powerful synthesizer. So you've got all your categories here, so you can just use presets. Anytime you select a filter, it's going to filter out, say, the keys, and that's all the presets that are keys. And then it goes through each one by one. So say you want keys that are piano, it's now going to leave you piano sounding keys. And then say you wanted stuff that's suitable for house, then it's going to leave you the ones that are keys, piano, and house. So if I open one up by clicking on it, and then you can choose by timbre as well. So that's all those 4 filters. I'm going to go back to all, and it's going to show everything. You can search. So if you want something that's bell sounding, you could just go bell. It's quite cool. It's a very powerful synthesizer, this. So there's some really interesting stuff. Down the bottom, you've got a performance area, so you can move that around and it's going to change the overall sound of the synth. Very cool. It's got an arpeggiator, so it will play individual notes, which is very nice. And there's an effects section in here, so things like reverbs, EQs, delays, that's all built into Alchemy itself. So if you remember, we talked about in one of the very early lessons that you could use the smart controls for this. If you find it a bit overwhelming, you can just come up here, use the smart controls. Let me close Alchemy, and here are the same things that we just looked at in a more manageable format. Cutoff for the filters, pitch. So yeah, that's the smart controls again, just to recap that. Let's go back into Alchemy. I'm going to click it. This already might seem quite powerful and confusing, but it gets a lot more intense. So simple mode is the simple mode, similar to what we just saw in the smart controls. But if you go to advanced, this is what's sitting underneath Alchemy. This is under the hood. So you've got each of these is a different source. So each of these can be a different oscillator. So you could have A, B, C, and D. If I click on the global, you can see all of those, A, B, C, and D. But if you want to edit these in more detail, you would click here. And then you can also see the filters. So all synthesizers pretty much have an oscillator or a source sound. Then they'll go through a filter and also amplitude envelopes. So the envelopes will kind of change how the sound sounds over time. We're really not going to go into this here because it's just way too advanced, but it's worth, once again, playing with the presets, which you can do up the top here. You can select one and you'll see all of these controls change. So a good way to get accustomed again is just to cycle through. And you can see what's going on. You can jump into source A, B, C, or D, come back to the global and see all of them, and then the filter. Yeah, so Alchemy is a very powerful synthesizer, one of the best ones I've ever used, to be honest. So definitely worth getting familiar with. If you want to turn off any of the sources, you just turn them off here, and then you can run it through filters. There's loads of different filters you can choose from. But if you're just starting out, it's probably best just to get familiar with the presets. So you can jump through them. There's thousands, to be honest. Yeah, 3,500 presets to start off with. So that is Alchemy. When I want to change the plugin, I just come over to Alchemy and I hit that button on the right. We've done the drums, we've done the studio instruments, we've done the 2 main synthesizers, but as I said, also check out the ES2. Sculpture's pretty cool as well. So utility, there's a kind of metronome plugin in here, which is just fairly uninteresting, to be honest. You might, if you're doing techno-y stuff, you might use it. But sine wavy, block sounds. Yeah, nothing too exciting, that one. And the test oscillator is when you want to create a test oscillator. This is for like working out how your room sounds and hearing acoustics. And yeah, if you just want to hear different frequencies and things, that's what the test oscillator's for. So, and you've got some keys down here. So you've got organs. Nice B3 organ. Presets up here. Loads of different types. Can move these drawers in and out. Have a play around with those. You've got a clav, which is nice. Clavinet. Loads of presets to choose from. Can change the pickup positions, the filters, the modes, dampening. You can add some effects on if you want, different effects. And then there's more details if you want to go into that, you can. Best just use the presets again, in my opinion. There's so many to choose from that you'll find the sound you want just by cycling through quite quickly. Okay, so next one is the electric piano. So similar again, but you're looking at more of like a Fender Rhodes. Once again, I recommend cycling through the presets until you find a sound you like. You've got details here, effects, details, effects. Do a bass boost, you've got EQs, driving if you want some distortion, chorus effects, phaser effect, tremolo. So that's cool. And then if you come over to details, you can change the number of voices, the decay and release, the stereo width, the bell, and then the overall pitch, which is detuning it, and so on. So yeah, once again, lots of presets to choose from, like Wurlitzers and Rhodes. And then you've also got the classic Mellotron, which is very old sounding synth. Presets, violins. And it works by there being 2 different sounds. You can have all of these different sounds. There's about 8 of them from the classic Mellotron. And then you can blend the 2 together. That brass is quite nice for a bass. But it definitely has an old sound to it. So yeah, that's the Mellotron. It's a fairly basic plugin. And the Drum Machine Designer, which we've already looked at. Then down here, you've got some ones that come from Apple. Here's where you have any third-party plugins, which if you're just starting out, you won't have, but over time you might add third-party plugins. So that's where your third-party plugins will live. And this is if you've got anything that are just MIDI controlled effects. So once again, mainly going to be third-party stuff, so you're not going to have too much there. So nothing to worry about it. So those are the main instruments in Logic Pro. And as I said, you can either load them up individually from the instrument sections here, or you can just come across to the library. Remember, Y is open and close the library, and you can find them in this here, and then you'll also get some additional effects on there. Okay, let's move on.